Hi all, welcome to the Matchbook Horse Racing Podcast. It's Friday morning again, and we are building up to, a really good weekend's racing. It's competitive stuff. We've got some Grade 1s on Sunday, obviously. We've got the Grade 1 fighting fifth at Newcastle, so there's loads to get stuck into, and we're going to do that with Dan Overall and Donn McClean on the Matchbook Betting Podcast. Dan Hussey is producing away behind the scenes. He'll have all the selections up for you on insights.matchbook.com after this podcast. Don't forget to like and follow and subscribe wherever you are listening. It makes it easier for you to check out all of our content across all of our different podcasts, NFL, Premier League, and horse racing as well. It's the best no-cost way of supporting this podcast. Okay, Saturday then is headed up by the Coral Gold Cup. And we have, I guess, if you were following the Icy Willie Twiston Davis chat, which I was on Twitter, I think the consensus is it might not be the best ever renewal, but it's pretty competitive. Donn, welcome along. Who do you like here and why?
Hi, Tom. Yeah. No, I think it's fair enough. It's not a Denman-esque renewal of the old Hennessy, the Coral Gold Cup. But it's a competitive race. Senior Chief is in there as well for Henry de Bromhead. Darrell O'Keefe going over to ride him. He won well at Cheltenham last time. Good that Haransa Dairy is going too for Willie Mullins. Danny Mullins going to ride him. I thought he ran well in the Munster National last time when they didn't go a great pace. Danny Mullins rode the winner actually that day. Real Steel. He set a pace to suit himself, and Real Steel quickened. Thought Haransa Dairy did well to get as close as he did from as far back as he was. For all that, it did look like he was coming to win the race, but then maybe the energy that he exerted in getting up to the prominent racers told in the end. So he's an interesting contender. But I think Galia de la Toe, I think she's probably the most interesting, Tom. She ran a massive race in the classic trial at Warwick back in January when, again, she was a little bit back in the field. My Silver Lining had beat her. She was ridden more prominently, and Galia de la Toe stayed on well, only went down by 3 parts of a length to My Silver Lining in the end. She didn't run badly in the Grand National on her final run last season, and then on her debut this year at Carlisle, she was beaten by Teresita in the end, but that was over 2.5 miles. She led from a long way out. She was only overhauled over the second last. It was over 2.5 miles. She should be better stepping back up in trip. Teresita actually didn't run badly there at Ascot on Friday off a mark of 135. Galia de la Toe is down to a mark of 144 now, which is just £2 higher than her classic chase marks. It's her second run back now after a wind operation. The soft ground will suit her this type of trip, and stamina test on the ground should suit her well. And yeah, look, the Dan Skelton horses are flying. I think she's a big player in the race.
That's Galia de la Toe looking to give the Skeltons another big Saturday handicap winner. Although they haven't had as many this year as they did last year, but no doubt they will get firing again soon on this day. They've had a brilliant season so far. Dan, overall, who do you like in the big handicap?
As you say, Tom, in the absence of a superstar or potential real top notch, what we do have is an ultra competitive race. I mean, you can make a case for pretty much everything in this lineup. So it wouldn't be one of my stronger fancies, but I've come down on Colonel Harry. Obviously, the comparisons with That's All Right Gino are pretty remarkable, really. The same mark, same owner, same connection, same jockey. It's pretty staggering, really. I mean, I don't know. You couldn't even plan that if you tried. But I thought this has always been a horse who's been a stayer masquerading over shorter trips. I think what he achieved over 2 miles and 2.5 miles for the bulk of his career has been impressive because I think he just is desperately in need of a trip. Obviously, running in some top races last year, I don't think he really had the tactical nous for like the Grade 1s at Cheltenham or Aintree. But I think finally he's going to get up to a trip that he's going to appreciate. Obviously, did beat Trelawn at Wetherby, which was somewhat aided by Trelawn going for a visit to the car park halfway through the race, admittedly. But the form of that seems reasonable. Had great prep run at Carlisle. I think that would have put him spot on. So he jumped slightly out to his left, so going back left hand is going to be a big help. I think this kind of big galloping track like Wetherby is also going to be a big factor for him. I think if you're looking at potential, I think the potential for him as a stayer could just give him a few pounds in hand, whereas a lot of these, I think, have shown look quite what they're about at this kind of trip, whereas I think he still has a bit of upside at this kind of staying trip. So it wouldn't be one of the stronger fancies of the weekend, but I've come down on Colonel Harry to improve for the trip.
I would be similar on not the strongest fancy of the weekend per se, but I feel like the race is just changing a bit. I mean, as in not just that it's getting weaker, and it isn't a race littered with some of those sort of former stars going on and winning it, if you like. The obvious comparisons to a Denman, but a Many Clouds, a Native River, and those sort of strong weight carrying performances as well. The recent renewals have gone to horses carrying a little bit less weight. Cloth Cap 10 stone, Cloudy Glen 10.8, that's right, 10.7, Lamilos 11 stone. Now, obviously, those carrying under 11 stone are few and far between here because you've only got 14 in the race. But I thought Henry's Friend was interesting. He's won here. The ground will be absolutely spot on. I'm not saying he's going to go and get an easy necessarily, but he'll be up there. I think he'll be too far back in not the biggest field renewal of this race. And it was just pretty obvious last time he was given a prep over hurdles without the cheek pieces, and they've gone back on. So he's a course winner. He's fine at the trip, and he's still got a bit of upside. I think I thought he was just a bit discounted at 13.0. Henry's Friend with the cheek pieces back on, where this has clearly been the plan. He won't be the best horse to ever win it, but I think he's nicely in at the weights, and I'll back him 13.0 win and place. So that's the Coral Gold Cup done. We're going to go through in the rest of Newbury first of all. Then we'll do Newcastle. Then we'll do Fairyhouse on Sunday. So Newbury, we're going to go back to the 154 2.5 mile handicap hurdle. And Dan, I'll come straight back to you. You've got a chunky old price here.
Yeah, he's a decent price, Issam. I can definitely see the appeal to the likes of Impostoir, the likes of In the Waterside. Definitely they have a higher ceiling than Issam, but I just think he's a very solid option here. Obviously, great comeback run in the Welsh Champion Hurdle when he was fourth. Obviously, Steel Ally's gone on to frank that. Lump Sum's going to run in the fighting fifth. Front two were in a bit of a different league to the rest, admittedly, but I think Issam was always running in that with a view to going back over further on softer ground, which he finally gets here. He's had numerous entries in the last couple of weeks, which he could have taken up, but they've skipped all of those to come here, which I think is interesting. And I think you go back to the form of his Wincanton win towards the end of last season, he's gone up £4 for it, but the form of that I think is really solid. The second and third were Resplendent Grey and Monvielle, who then went on to be first and second next time out. Obviously, Resplendent Grey's gone on to do quite well over fences this season. The fourth was a well-backed Paul Nicholls handicap debutant, and the fifth was a Dan Skelton handicap debutant who's won his first two races over fences this season. So I think for the time of year and the track, that was a really solid effort, and a £4 rise, when you look at the form, actually looks fairly fair. Now, I say I don't think he has the ceiling that some of these in here do, but he's got race fitness on his side. Conditions are absolutely ideal. So I thought at 13.0, he was a very fair win and place option.
All right. I'll jump in with one of the horses you mentioned that's Impostoir. I thought it was pretty obvious. He's 5.0. So, I mean, if you really want to be cheeky, you can back him win and place. And he's a horse who I followed for quite a bit of last year. I was interested to see where he was going to go at the festival. Obviously, he didn't. I think he was one of those that was intended for one and was taken out. I liked his November meeting performance last year. The Lucia form looks pretty good. I guess it's just the absence, but he was a horse on my radar, a few in these colours for the yard, who I thought might just, kick on and have a pretty good year. I think he could easily be better than a marker 134. He was a little bit bigger than I thought. Thought he'd be really well fancied at the top of the market. Obviously, they've got the favourite for the Jerry Fielden, who we'll come to. But I felt he was more solid than that horse. I thought he's a pretty solid option at the top of the market, 5.0 Impostoir. I think that there's one that's going to go and win it quite nicely. It might be him. Donn.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with any of that in Impostoir. He's an exciting horse for the year ahead, but I think the market kind of has him. And James Bowen with Nico de Bonville, obviously at Newcastle for Sergino in the fighting fifth, which we'll come on to now. James Bowen rides Impostoir. He rode him last time he ran at Kempton back in January. So I think he's a worthy favourite. Nicky Henderson has 4 in the race. And James Bowen actually rode Spring Note in her last few runs. But I think she's been a wee bit overlooked by the market here. She goes really well at Newbury. She's run there 3 times. She's won all 3 times, and because she was well beaten at Cheltenham the last time we saw her in April. But that was in a really competitive handicap hurdle. She led from early. She came home without a shoe. She stayed over towards the far side in the home straight, and in the end she faded up the hill. But I think she ran a lot better than a finishing position suggests. She was 13th to 15, but she beat Brentford Hope at Newbury the last time she raced there back in March. Brentford Hope has since run 4 times. He's won twice, finished second twice, including in the elite hurdle, including in the Killashe Hotel, big competitive handicap hurdle behind Daddy Longlegs at the Punjastand Festival. And he goes in the 5 and 5th as well on Saturday. So that was a big run by her. They pulled nicely clear of the rest. You'd probably prefer her over 2 miles. She does like to get out in front, and she likes to be ridden aggressively these days. So the 2.5 mile trip is probably not ideal, but I think that's compensated for by the price. And yeah, I can see her racing prominently and being up there in the van for a long way, and maybe lasting for long enough to go very close.
All right, so that's the 2 mile, 4.5 furlong handicap hurdle, the 154 at Newbury. And then we come back in distance to the 2 mile, half furlong Jerry Fieldon, which is a premier handicap. Jericho de Repene is the one at the top of the market. But you couldn't touch him, could you, at 5.5, Dan?
Yeah, this is a strange one, because I think realistically, if he didn't have that experience over fences, he'd be a lot shorter than this, because he's clearly unbelievably well handicapped on Mark 135. I was actually just hoping they'd stick to hurdles with him going into this season. I thought he'd be really good betting material for something like the Greatwood. Turns out that was quite a hot race, but I've always thought that mark was there to be exploited based on that lump sum form. Obviously, there have to be doubts about what happened to him, but I mean, it's classic Nicky Henderson. It seems. You can't catch a break. He has all these weird horses having strange issues that no one's ever had, like bees and wasps getting into the tacking area and stinging the horse before he's due to go out. He's obviously he went to Kempton the other day just to get saddled up and have a bit of a more positive experience getting back on the track. So they're taking every measure they can to make sure that isn't going to be an issue. I just look at him and think, I know he's not the best price in the world, but I think 5.5 is fair enough for a horse who's undoubtedly well handicapped. I know he didn't look visually impressive in that Rossington Main where he beat Lump Sum, but go back to what John Bond did in that race. It was quite similar. I don't think he was absolutely geared up for that. I think it's very much a period where Nicky Henderson's novice hurdlers are kind of just getting ready for their spring engagements. They're not at their absolute best. So I think that was a good performance in the circumstances. Obviously, the Supreme you can write off the yard form, and just nothing really went right for him. This is a good race. I've obviously seen your guys' selections as well, and I can absolutely see the case for many in here. I would just say on the ground, I know that the descriptions are getting better and it looks like it's quickening, but the going stick readings would concern me and make me believe it's going to ride more testing than it is. Obviously, it's saying currently it is soft, good to soft in places on the hurdles, good to soft on the chase course. But the going stick on the hurdles track is 3.8 and 4.2 on the chase track. That would suggest it's more testing than it is, and that would just slightly put me off a horse like Queen's Gamble. Obviously, we'll learn more about it today. Obviously, we're going to get racing today, but I'm currently working on the basis that the ground is going to be a bit more testing than the going descriptions.
It's interesting all that you say about Jericho de Repene. So I before I came down on the horse I've written out, which is Excelero, I did type out Jericho de Repene, and I also typed out Queen's Gamble. So it tells you how confident I am about the race. I'm really glad you've written Jericho de Repene, because obviously it's all there, and I'm probably going to end up backing the horse because it's just obvious, right? He's going to go and absolutely bolt up. But also, if he doesn't, I don't look an idiot because he's pulled up the last 2 times we've seen him. So there you go. And I definitely take the point about the Doncaster run before going into Cheltenham, when obviously he wasn't right. Nicky's a historically not revved up for that sort of time of year, January, February, because it's all about the festival. Queen's Gamble, who I typed out. I also have a slight niggling concern about the horse. There've been a few notable ones from the yard that just disappointed. I'm not sure they're in perfect nick personally. Obviously there was a high profile one, Imagine, but I don't know, it's just been a few that have been a touch disappointing for an excellent yard. So Excelero I thought was a solid safe bet at 11.0, who 11.5 lengths behind Sergino, who we'll come to, wasn't bad in the end, then went out and won at Market Raising off the back of that. I just look at that mark and I think, yeah, I could see that. I like the yards horses tend to have a run, but he hasn't. I don't know. 11.0 win and place felt the safest option for me of all Donn.
Yeah, it's very difficult what to know what to do with Jericho de Repene. He's kind of binary, isn't he? He either pulls up or he wins. That's what his record says. But definitely see Dan's point in the price at 5.5 or thereabouts. If he runs his race, if you take it that he's binary, either runs or wins, and or pulls up or wins, and he's won more often than he's pulled up, then you can easily argue that 5.5 is a big price. I'm just excited to see him again and see how he goes now back over hurdles. But outside of him, I think our champ is still an underrated horse. We had him inside when he won the last time at Ascot. We were probably lucky to collect that day because his rider dropped his whip on the run in, and Break My Soul, she stretched her neck out on the line and he just got there. But he got £5 for that up to a mark of 136. And I think a lot of the reasons for backing him then hold true. Break My Soul and Affadilla finished second and fourth that day. They were both beaten behind Okun Risk. There's another Chris Gordon horse, actually, like our champ at Ascot last time. But Break My Soul, she was keen that day. She made mistakes at the last two flights. So I think she's better than that. I think it's strong form from that Ascot race. And he's a horse who just likes to race just off the pace. And off a fast pace would be ideal. Soft ground would be a worry, although he did run well on heavy ground for a long way in the Betfair Hurdle here back at Newbury back in February last season this year. So he's got form on soft ground, for all that his best form is probably on better ground. But he came on from his market raising run to Ascot the last day. I think he can come forward again because he and Break My Soul did a nice break on the rest of the field. And even when he ran at Cheltenham in April, as we mentioned the last day, I thought he did well to finish third behind Tin Tin Tin, and Tin 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 ran a big race in the Greatwood Hurdle. He led that day and he was harried on the front end, but he kept on well. I think he's better ridden just off the pace than Freddie Gordon. Is good value for his £5 claim, and he's a decent price, our champ. I think he can maybe outrun his odds again.
All right, then we come to the final one on the day at Newbury. That's for the Jim Joel Memorial Trophy. It's 2 mile half a furlong, 3:35. Imperial Saint is 3.5. Petit Tonnerre is 5.5. Is said Dairy 8.0. Bigger prices thereafter. Straight back at you, Don. Who do you like?
Yeah, I was a bit like you in the last race, Tom. Here, I wrote down Petit Tonnerre first, and then I thought Imperial Saint. He's just so solid. Like he's been so impressive in his last two runs. He beat Petit Tonnerre at Aintree, and then he progressed from that. Petit Tonnerre didn't in the Lotus Old race the last day, but just think Imperial Saint. He's short enough. His two chase wins have been on good ground, so and both at Aintree. So he's now at Newbury, which is not dissimilar to Aintree, I suppose, in lots of ways, flat left-handed. But again, he's been cottoned on to now. He's £10 higher than he was at Aintree. He's probably going to have to improve again, for all that he does look seriously progressive and a better chaser than Hurdler, obviously. But I just thought then that Issar Dairy has a lot in his favour. He's won 2 of his 5 chases. He finished second last time behind Martator at Ascot when he split Martator and Cotmask, and they both came out there at Ascot at the weekend and finished first and second in a similar type of race over the course and distance. Martator is now £17 higher than he was then. Issar Dairy races off just a £2 higher mark, 130. And I think he's just a horse who can improve again. He goes well at Newbury as well. He's run there over fences twice. He's won both times. So back at Newbury now, and back on soft ground. That suits him. It was good ground the last day at Ascot. There was a bit of a worry going into the race whether he'd handle it okay, but he did handle it all right. But I think he'll be even better back on softer ground. The Moors, Gary and Joss Moore, they had 2 winners at Lingfield yesterday out of 4 runners, so they are in good form. And yeah, I think Issar Dairy might be a wee bit of value against Imperial Saint and Petit Tonnerre.
Well, I'm with a horse who has talking about the Petit Tonnerre Imperial Saint form. That they've clashed. Well, they clashed that day at Aintree. I thought that was a pretty good run from Petit Tonnerre. It was a mark-up performance because he and there's only 7 runners, but you know, the first and the third were up there throughout. He ran on with a good bit of promise. And rather than suggesting he needs further, although I have thought that in the past about him, and I think I backed him at the festival. I'm pretty sure I did.
You've backed this horse far too many times, Tom. You have the patience of an Imperial Saint, if I may say so.
He's going to be.
I can't believe you're going in again with him. I really can't.
I think he's my best bet. Him and wait for the festival. Frero Bamboo Petit Tonnerre double. A well-handicapped horse is a well-handicapped horse. He should have. I thought he ran really well at Aintree. I mean, last time that's just not him. You know, a flying 2 miles around Cheltenham, not him in a grade 2 where Lotus Soup bolted up. If he was well treated over hurdles, 136, 127. I'm gonna side. I thought he was in fact, when I put him up, I know he's only shortened up half a point, but I just thought he was a perfect in a 10-runner field win place bet. You're not going to lose any money on that. He might not win, but he'll be there or thereabouts. He's incredibly solid, and I hope JP McManus has a good day. Dan.
No one has ever meaningfully said the words Petit Tonnerre is very solid. I mean, he's solid enough not to win, because that's kind of what he does. I can see the place part. You'll probably collect on that, but he just has an amazing habit of getting beat.
There we go.
Well, we should have done place only then. Just spare the win part. Just don't even worry about that. Just have him running on into third and be happy.
Anyway, you've written code for yours. You've written Isederi and Etalon bracket plus RFC.
Yeah, because I think Imperial Saint is just far too short. Like, he's been very good on his first couple of starts, but this is a long cry from beating Magistrato and Calgary Tiger, which he did so last year in a race which was just run at a helter-skelter pace, and he just kind of picked up the pieces. Like, this is a much deeper race. I mean, echo everything Donn said on Isederi. He's unbelievably solid. He's got Newbury form. Obviously, he beat I'd Like to Know, who's, I think, 13.0 for this race. And he's £11 better off of him here. Also beat Martator here. He's unbelievably solid. And Etalon, I think I'm willing to forgive his last couple of runs. Really progressive horse last year. Then got thrown into the Grade 1 at Aintree, where I think just found the fact that he'd been in relatively small field handicaps, going straight into a Grade 1 there. I think he found that all a bit too much. Ground was far too quick when he ran in the Holden Gold Cup. I shaped well enough for a long way. Tired jumps 4 out and 3 out. I think he'll come on a lot for that. He's another horse who's beat Martator at Newbury. Obviously, that was on his chase debut. Look, Martator's clearly improved a lot for that. But I think a track like Newbury really suits Etalon, because he's kind of a big galloping 2-miler who I think will stay 2.5 miles, no issue. So I think if he gets back into form, he's got a massive chance here as well. And because Imperial Saint is making the market for them, I have no issue backing them both. And I'll do a little reverse forecast as well, because I think Isederi in particular is very solid.
As is Petit Tonnerre. Right, we move on to the I just love I love making Dan put his head in his hands.
You do it far too much.
By the way, talking of Frere Bamboo, in the fucking rehearsal chase, lads.
Always been crying out for 3 miles.
Like
a resolute stayer.
A 2-miler running over 2.5 repeatedly, and you're like banging your head against a brick wall. I know, 3 miles, bang. Right. Anyway, we'll get there. We'll get there. Might have to have a saver. He's very solid. The fighting fit, 210. So now this is, I know, Donn, over to you. I can't have a bet because I think Segino is exceptional, and I think Mystical Power is very good. But I didn't necessarily expect Segino to actually head the market off the back of Mystical Power's second at Cheltenham and then dual Grade 1 success at the back end of last season. Whereas Segino, obviously, with his truncated season and then winning at Aintree, I sort of felt like Mystical Power would head the market and I would back Segino. But here is Segino rocking up shorter than Mystical Power. I also took the view possibly that Constitution Hill's bad piece of work with Segino. Well, maybe it wasn't that bad. And maybe Segino just worked incredibly well. And maybe Segino is absolutely exceptional. But equally, I didn't think he'd head the market. So I'm sitting on my hands, Donn McClean.
Yeah, no, it's it's really interesting, this race. Obviously, Segino hasn't had the ideal preparation. He was going to be going over fences until the last week happened. But Mystical Power, like Segino aside for a second, he's enough, like his breeding by Galileo out of any power that made him high profile before he ever raced. Interestingly, that he won a bumper at Ballon Road back in the summer of last year. So he's obviously improved since then. And like to run at Cheltenham and Aintree and Punchestown, we know that that's not easy. Now, he didn't win it all three, but he ran a massive race in the Supreme Novices Hurdle. He looked the most likely winner over the last, and then Slade Steele just battled him up the hill. Then he went to Aintree, won really impressively, won the Top Novices Hurdle, battled on well to beat Firefox, who was a top-notch horse, and then beat Firefox again in the Punchestown race the last day. I just think he seems to have improved throughout last season. I think there's every chance he'll improve again this season. No, we weren't sure during the summer whether he was going to go over fences or not, but I think kind of the feeling was that he would stay over hurdles. And I think he's a player in the champion hurdle picture. Obviously, if he's going to be that, he's going to have to go very close to winning the fighting fifth. But I think he can. And look, Sergino, we just don't know how good he could be. He was so good last season. It was such a shame we didn't see him in the Triumph Hurdle. But then he went to Aintree and was obviously impressive there. And he is back over hurdles now. So there's no worry about his ability to handle the obstacles, as there would be. It would be a new discipline if he was going over fences. But he was targeted at fences until recently. And it's not the ideal preparation. That it might not make any difference at all. But at the same time, Mystical Power has probably been coming here for a little while. And look, as you say, Tom, there's hardly a kick of a ball between them in terms of, at the moment, the things that we know about them. But I thought Mystical Power will be favourite in front of Sergino, and therefore I think he's a wee bit overpriced.
I can see that. I feel like Dan and I think Sergino will win, but we're both no bet, right? That's fair. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my type of betting race anyway. I mean, I think there are far more tempting propositions across the weekend than 5-4 about a shot we know there's a few unknowns. But like you, Tom, I do think Sergino could be just very, very good. And I think there's been this conception for a while now that obviously juveniles struggle going into open company. I think that's probably changing more because the profile of juveniles is also changing. We're now getting far more French breds over who we know are generally just more forward and more ready to compete in better races, as opposed to going back a few years where it's more traditionally flat horses going over hurdles, then really struggling against your proper national hunt types. And that's understandable. And last year's crop of juveniles were just exceptional. It's not a usual year. You do not have 4-year-olds winning Galway hurdles, Greatwood hurdles. See, Carla Conti came out and won a deep handicap as well earlier this season. Like, that's all not traditional at all. So for them to do that would suggest it's a very strong bunch of juveniles going into open company. The way he beat Carguez at Aintree, despite routing the third and second last down the straight, and he's got a serious engine. I think ultimately he's going to be one for chasing and maybe over a bit further. I think he's out of no issue staying further. But he always came with a big reputation ever since he beat Salvatore Mundi over in France, and obviously he's now a leading fancy for the Supreme in his own right. I think everything would suggest, from what we've seen so far, that Sergino is a proper top-notcher.
It's such an interesting race, and I also take the point about I think they do find it hard. Obviously, the rising 5-year-olds coming out of juvenile company, but when you get a top notcher, I think that just goes out the window a bit. When you get a really good one, they can compete. I think some years you get overinflated ratings for some of the juvenile crop coming out, and they try and tackle the big boys or the older horses in open company, and they struggle. But I think Sergino is good enough to suggest that we can't necessarily level that against him, just on age. But we're going to find out more. I'm saying all this, and I'm not willing to back him. I like the conversations going on as well. Hi Lee, welcome along. We'll have you back on very soon. Giles says the older novice division is invariably stronger than the juvenile division. So, and Willie says Mystical Power has strengthened up, so he can't be opposed. I mean, he's not going to say he's weak as piss, but I take the point. Peter says good morning. Tom says Sergino wins. Peter says Constitution Hill for the champion hurdle. Mad. Tom says I back Sergino for the champion at 9.0. I'll correct you. I'll probably back Mystical Power on Saturday to cover myself, though. Trevor agreed, Giles, but the 4-year-old looks good. Sergino looks a Rick. I prefer 9.0 for the champion hurdle. It's just what I mean by this is like good races like this where two top notchers take each other on creates excitement and debate, and we are all here for it. Just like we had last weekend in the Morgiana where Willie ran. Oh no. Because she bruised her foot. But she's better because she might run on Sunday, so that's good. Okay. The rehearsal chase looks a pretty good renewal. 2 miles, 7.5. I mean, I say that. I don't even know if it's a good. I'm filling. Is it a good renewal? Dan, answer me. Is it a decent renewal of the rehearsal chase, and who do you like?
I'd say it's average enough. I mean, when you're looking at the top 3 in the betting and their winning record, it wouldn't exactly fill you with confidence. I mean, Bout of Greatness won on his 13th try of offences. Donny Boy's 0 from 8, and the Changing Man's 0 from 6, despite always threatening to be very well handicapped and bolting up in handicaps. He never seems to go and do it. I would say he should be the right favourite. See, I think he fell last time out seeing the Badger Bears. I don't think he would have got to anywhere near Our Dancer. I think Our Dancer was just a bit of a freakish performance that day. But I'd have him as the favourite. But I think Some Scope is massively overpriced at 26.0. Obviously, if you ignore last time, and I think there are plenty of reasons to, he just was given a very strange ride at Cheltenham. He was way out the back, never got into a rhythm. they've clearly found some issues since because he's had wind up, and I did see some quote around. I can't find it again, unfortunately, but they did allude to him having some issues.
He drifted like stink as well.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily surprising. I mean, Richard Hobson's runners generally do improve for a run, but I mean, this was too bad to be true. But before that, he was very progressive. Obviously, you go back to his mark, he's now down to a mark 125, and he was second in the Grimthorpe Does He Know in conditions that would not have suited him at all, because he's a good ground horse, which you'll get here. He's £2 lower than when he was fourth at Cheltenham towards the back end of last season. I think generally you look at his profile, better ground, flatter tracks, stiffer tracks as well, which is, I think that will lend itself quite nicely to this test here. I think that all suits him. I said, for a horse who had a very upward profile and still did until one run ago, which there are many excuses for, I can't really believe he's 26.0 in a race full of horses that don't generally like winning. And Richard Hobson's record at Newcastle as well is pretty good. I mean, 18 runners, he had 5 winners and a further 5 have placed, which is pretty impressive. See, Paul O'Brien takes over from Gavin Sheehan, who's at Newbury. No issues there. Obviously, Paul O'Brien has a good relationship with Richard Hobson's ridden many a winner for him. I just thought 26.0 was massive about him.
Yeah, I followed you in. He's still in my tracker for some reason, this horse, but I was tempted to back him at Cheltenham. He drifted. It was almost like he couldn't win. He ran an absolute shocker. He's had his win done, all of that. I mean, he's a massive price based upon the price he went off at Cheltenham last time. Crazy. I'd rather he should be Ferrer Bamboo's price, and they flip him around. The other one I like is Gustavian for Anthony Honeyball. He's got 2 in the race. Thought he ran pretty well last time at Wincanton when the sort of front 2 had it between them. He's been eased £4 since that. He's definitely competitive off this sort of mark, and his run at the back end of last season was I thought over a weird trip when they tried to force the pace, but I could see him knocking on the door here anyway at 11.0, but it wasn't an overly confident shout. Donn.
Yeah, it's a competitive race. I can see Marvel Sounds running well. I can see Donny Boy running well without winning. He is a horse that seems to like to find one to beat him. Although he did stay on Newcastle there in December. He actually got past Jet Legs after the winning line, which is no good if you want to get paid, but still showed that he did have that attitude to go on and get him. But he does like to finish second, so he goes well at Newcastle as well. I can see him running well. I like Jet Play, and I just think he's progressive now. He was progressive towards the end of last season. And I thought his run at Weatherby on his debut this term was a very good run. He stayed on after it looked like he was beaten to finish a close-up third behind Jaguar and Half Shot. And Half Shot had won at Kelso on his previous run off at £3 lower mark. And Jaguar went down to 1 next time at Bangor off a £5 higher mark. He's now a stone higher than he was then. Jet Plane gets to race off the same mark. I think that should bring him forward. And I think as well, like that was over not even 2.5 miles. I think the step up and trip would suit him well. He's won 3 times over further than 3 miles. So I think with the Rehearsal Chase, the ground is probably going to be better than it is going to be better than we're used to for the Rehearsal Chase. Remember, Rehearsal Chase is when they've been running in really testing conditions. But I think the better ground will suit Jet Plane as well. He's got good form on good ground, and continuing the Dan Skelton theme, yeah, I think he'll go well.
Okay, good stuff. Ryan has contributed to say Dan looks a lot like Elon Musk. I hadn't seen that before, but
that can't be a good thing, can it? I wish.
Yeah. Lee says the changing man and Sergino at Newcastle. Away. Good luck, Lee. Okay. So that's done for the Saturday. So any other Saturday bets first of all? You've got one at Fairyhouse. Got any prices, Donn?
Yeah, haven't been able to find prices, no.
Yeah, 4.5 Butlers.
Really?
Yeah, Carlo Conti heads them for the one. Yeah. This is for the Willow Warm Hurdle, right?
Yeah, the great through the Willow Warm Hurdle. Yeah, no, I think Bottler's Secret. Look, he was a really progressive juvenile last season. He didn't get to Cheltenham. He won at Naas. Was probably late enough that win in February without it was too close to Cheltenham to go there. But he went to Fairyhouse, he won there, and then he went to Pointerstown. He finished second behind Cargese in the Champion 4-year-old hurdle there. He was beaten at Cheltenham on the debut this season by Gimme 5, who had finished well behind him at Fairyhouse back at the Easter meeting. But I thought that the ground was probably just a wee bit better than ideal for Bottler's Secret. I think back now on softer ground, back at Fairyhouse, where he won that Grade 2 race. I think there's more to come from him. And look, Gimme 5, it's great that Gimme 5 is coming over. Harry Durham is sending him over. And Carlo Conti, as Dan was saying earlier on, she won really impressively at Down Royal the last day. She's going to be a big player in the race as well. But yeah, I'm surprised to see that she's favourite in front of him, of Butler's Secret, actually. Yeah, so I think he's interesting.
Okay, that's Butler's Secret in the 155. You got one at Newbury, Dan?
Yeah, and the Peter O'Sullivan Memorial, the 1240, I thought Demnat, who opened up at 9.0, I thought was really interesting. So Royale's full brother, as he overcame a really long absence to win on his chase debut at Ludlow over 2.5 miles off a mark 122. Absolutely bolted up. And admit this is obviously a deeper race, but he looked really progressive there. Looked like a horse who would go on to bigger and better things. Given a really strange campaign after that, it turned out relatively quickly, went to Newbury actually over 2 miles on bottomless ground, just didn't really ever get involved. Then after that, they went to the Kinmure, obviously over 3 mile too. And if you watch that race back, he's absolutely tanking along. He jumps to third last in front and he's going really well. He just tired late on in really testing conditions over 3 mile 2 on the new course. Understandable. He doesn't stay that far. Not exactly a massive surprise for So Royale's brother. Showed the effects of that, I think, at Aintree, where it didn't really get competitive. But he's dropped down to a mark 127 now, only £5 higher than when he absolutely bolted up at Ludlow. Still really unexposed. I think finally back at a trip that's going to suit him. I think 2 mile 6 is probably about ideal. They've said he's better going left-handed, so it was a bit of a surprise to them when he actually won at Ludlow going right-handed. I think conditions are absolutely spot on for him here, and I think he could have a good more couple of races in him off the current mark 127.
Okay, well, he won't run in the Kinmure this year because they'll probably run Frere Bamboo in the fucking Kinmure. Right. I'm over it.
Yeah, you sound it.
Donn, Sunday, Drinmore, Hatton's Grace, Royal Bond. Any bets you are going to have? Is that? I mean, it's outrageously good race. We hope it's going to be deep because we don't have decks yet.
Yeah.
Anything you like?
Look, it's a hell of a day, Tom. A lot depends on what run. Space Warrior, I thought, won well at Fairyhouse and Maiden Hurdle, and Tom Mullins said afterwards that he'd probably come on to this race. It's a grade 3 juvenile hurdle, so I'll be interested to see how he goes in that, if he does take his chance. The Porterstown is chatting to John Flavin during the week in Street Value, who won the race last year. He's back. He says he's in really good form. It's a real Dar stamina test. The Porterstown run over the Irish Grand National course and distance, and he's only £2 higher now than he was last year when he won it, so be interested to see how he goes there. The Royal Bond hurdle, Romeo Coolio.
Just confirm the name of that horse. So Street Value, was it?
Street Value, yeah, he won it last year. He's a real loves a real stamina test, and obviously goes well at Fairyhouse. Jumped well the last year as well, and John Flavin had a good winner there during the week in Clarence. So the horse there in good form. The Royal Bond hurdle, Romeo Coolio, could be interested to see him again, see how he goes. He jumped really well on his debut at Down Royal for Gordon Elliott. Bleu de Vassy is a horse that I like. I'm not sure if he's going to run here as well as Romeo Coolio. Gordon Elliott has the option of running both. He's got Wingman in the race as well, and Cashildale Lad. But Bleu de Vassy, wherever he goes next, I'll be interested in him. But Romeo Coolio looks like the stable's #1 in the Royal Bond. And then Firefox against Hartwood and the Drinmore Chase. That's a hell of a race. Hartwood, I think it's Hartwood's last day as a novice, so Henry de Bromhead taking the option and exploiting that opportunity. And Teahupoo against Lossiemouth in the Hatton's Grace hurdle. Interesting how they bet on that. They have Teahupoo in as a shade of just shading favoritism, I think, and I think that's about right. Trying to win the race for the 3rd year running, but obviously giving £7 to Lossiemouth, that's going to be difficult. But yeah, I think he might just be able to do it.
Any view on that race, Dan? Just on, I half expected Lossiemouth to head the market against Teahupoo just because of the profile that she comes with. But maybe there's a concern she's not over a slight issue, even though she's looking likely to line up. View on that?
Yeah, I guess it's a shade of Bright Days Ahead versus Stateman in terms of, one has stamina assured and is probably going to make it a test. You can imagine the layout of the race. Obviously, Jack's going to make it a stamina test and try and get Lossiemouth out of a comfort zone. If the ground was really testing, I think Teahupoo would be a very strong bet. I think on better ground, Lossiemouth comes into it. See, I know she only proved she stayed 2.5 miles in the mare's hurdle, which is a different kettle of fish, arguably, going up against Teahupoo, but I thought she was just a generally classier horse than Teahupoo. So on better ground, I can see her kind of looming up 2 out, Teahupoo kind of being at it. And if Lossiemouth is fully tuned up, I think she'll just go past. But again, the concern would be a la Stateman. Will she need the run? Is that slight stone bruise been a bit of an issue? Will she improve for the run? Again, these are the unknown factors. You imagine Tia Hooper, given they've sparingly campaigned him and may well go straight to the stayers again, he'll probably be pretty much gunned for this 100%, which I think is probably why the market's leaning towards him. But I think a prime Lossiemouth would beat Tia Hooper here on decent enough ground.
I just wanted to say one other thing about the Royal Bond, because it's the race I'm most interested in. Romeo Coolio, one of my horses to follow this year, off the back of his brilliant run at Cheltenham when doing best of those to make that big move from off. I thought he ran an absolute cracker, as did Jalon Dudery, to be fair. But I thought Cashledale Lad was interesting. It's obviously a race where you think about how many good 2-mile novice hurdlers Willie Mullins has had, but in recent years, Quick, Grab Him and Statuaire, the ones to win it. It's just not a race. Well, it's November, isn't it? So, well, actually, it's Sunday the 1st of December, but it's just not necessarily the time they're really revved up. And I thought if a horse like Cashledale Lad ran, I think he's really interesting going forward. He's a horse who he had one run on the flat where he won. He then was entered in the Triumph. He was meant to run on, and the ground put paid to it last year. They obviously then pulled stumps. I thought he was impressive on his reappearance. I think he's just sort of snuck into this year. I think he might be really good, basically. I'm interested to see where Cashledale Lad runs. Okay, we are done on Sunday. So long shots, first of all. Matchbook Zero goes live at 1 hour before each race that you are betting on. Most likely to get best odds because it's enhanced by zero margin and zero commission. So do check it out. Mine's Excelero in that 225 at Newbury, 11.0. Donn.
Yeah, Gallia de la Toe in the Carl Gold Cup.
And Dan?
Some scope in the rehearsal chase.
Dan, you're laying horses on Friday at Newbury?
Yeah, this one may be controversial. It's the two favourites in the long distance hurdle. I think this is a tricky race. I don't think it's as straightforward as it looks. Obviously, on what we know, on absolute peak form, Strong Leader and Langadan are well clear. I don't think you can possibly trust Langadan to run his race here for various reasons. And I don't think Strong Leader's the simplest either. I remember when he was running in the Ascot hurdle, he had that race won and completely threw it away. Last time out, and that start of last season, he desperately needed a run. It was over 2 miles in the Welsh champion, but finished last of that. I don't know, he may have well been ready for a while, but I think his season will be geared around the bigger races. Will he be 100% for this? I'm not sure. So I look at what's in opposition, and again, it's not inspiring, but Monmoral was always a very talented horse. Finally started to put it together after a couple of years in the wilderness in 2 mile grade ones open company, then going over fences. Didn't like that. Obviously won the Pertemps when Blinkers went on for the first time. Has had the run. That was clearly a blowout with a view to bigger targets. Blinkers go back on. He still has scope to improve as a 3 mile hurdler, I think. And then you have Flight Deck, who looks the no-hoper here based on everything we know on figures. But he was only beaten 2 lengths in this race last year. He was a keen-going front-running type who didn't even get the running of the race last year, whereas normally he does. He was taken on for the lead, didn't get it his own way. He will get it his own way this year. The form of that race last year you can maybe question, but Paisley Park was in there. Obviously, he went on to be second in the Cleve. He actually was ahead of Strong Leader when they met at Cheltenham as well, giving him £6. It's more about who's going to be ready to run their race. And I look at Monmoral. He's had the run. Blinkers back on. I think he's ready. He'll be there, ready to go. And Flight Deck, you don't really get many 34.0 outsiders who are going to have the run of the race fitness on their side, and were only beaten a couple of lengths in the same race last year. So if Strong Leader and Langadan are in top form, they'll be the first and second. But I think there are plenty of reasons to think they won't be, and that then opens this race up.
Okay, that's our lay. Strong Leader and Langadan in the long distance. Best bets, Petit Tonnerre in the 335 at Newbury for me. Donn, win and place. Donn?
Win and place, of course. In the chase, think he'll come on for his run at Welby the last day.
And Dan?
I'll go for Demnat in the Peter O'Sullivan Memorial.
Thanks all. Really enjoyed that. Thanks for all your contributions. Great chat throughout. That's largely what the jump season does. So thanks to everyone that's contributed. Head to insights.matchbook.com for a recap of all the best bets. Producer Dan Hussey will have that up very shortly for you. And have a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.